So just before we get kicked off here, this is Andrew from the NSBA here. Thank you everybody for attending today's webinar. You see our Mayor, Charlie Clark, also on the screen here. I'm just going to give a quick outline of today's webinar before turning it over to the Mayor. Today's webinar will be divided into 3 parts. In the first part, Mayor Clark will give an outline of how the City of Saskatoon is handling the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of its own employees and services, as well as any community action. The second part will be devoted to questions from the audience. If you have a question, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen or send a message in the chat. The Mayor may or may not be able to get all of the questions, but we at the NSBA will do our best to make sure that any unanswered questions are sent to the Mayor's office for follow-up. Lastly, this is something different for those of you who have tuned in to one of our previous webinars. We are going to get interactive and let the Mayor ask some questions of the business community. In this section, Mayor Clark will ask for feedback on some topics, and we encourage you to respond. There will be 2 options for responding. If you want to answer verbally, you can use your raise hand option, and we'll turn your mic on for your response. You'll also need to unmute yourself at that time. Or if you just want to answer in writing, you can pop your answer into the chat box, and we'll provide the transcript of that chat to the Mayor's office so that your feedback is heard. I'm going to include all of these instructions in the chat box as well. But now, without further ado, I'll turn it over to our Mayor, Charlie Clark.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew, and good morning, everybody. I think we're all getting used to Zoom calls and Skype calls and Google calls and all these things in a whole different way. And in this case, I'm fortunate that I'm able to be in my office and not at home with the dog barking and the kids fighting and all the other things that have happened in my calls and in probably some of your other calls as well. So I'm glad to have a chance to talk to whoever is on the call today from the NSBA. I'm grateful for the NSBA putting these webinars together. So Keith and Andrew and your team, thank you for doing this. You know, we've talked a lot about how important, while we're doing physical distancing, it is these days. We need to keep the connections and the collaboration and the communication between us strong, even as we do this. And I don't know about you, but we're actually finding in the city that we're able to adapt to these technologies in a way that is pretty amazing, and how much work can actually still get done. And so I'm going to start by just acknowledging and recognizing just how much of a massive disruption we're under right now in terms of our local economy and our community. And to recognize and acknowledge for all of you out there who have had to lay off people that you care about, talented people that you're concerned about them and their families, and about what you're going to do without that talent as we look at how long this could stretch out and the uncertainties of what lies ahead and how difficult this is for businesses. There are businesses that have had to close their doors and are now facing that same uncertainty about your future revenues and your viability and how you're going to cover costs and overhead as we navigate through this. The news just yesterday about 15,000 jobs lost in the restaurant industry is unbelievable. You know, most of our hotel industry operating with 5% occupancy. It's unprecedented. We're going through it with the rest of the world. But we know that for a lot of people right now is a time that's it's about survival and about keeping together to get through this together. But I don't want to minimize in any way any of the impacts of what that means and the importance of us working together in the spirit of Saskatoon. You know, it's just something I talked about in my very first NSBA luncheon not very long after becoming mayor. The spirit of being in a city where people have a history of working together and getting through hard times together now is as important a time as ever for that spirit to remain strong and to keep us finding that way forward together. And I've been so impressed at how so many parts of our community have been doing that and coming together. The Day of Caring that Rolco put on just on Tuesday to support the food banks was unbelievable, starting with a $1 million contribution from them and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that came in from the community. We know there's going to be more needed. The Prime Minister announced more money for food today, which is a good thing. There's so many ways that we can continue to innovate and support each other and find our way through this. I've also talked to a number of different businesses that are finding ways to adapt and adjust their practices and their process, whether it's restaurants doing delivery or carpet installers, you know, coming up with ways to keep going out and working in the new construction industry to get to do their work under these physical distancing guidelines. I'm hearing of businesses that are actually finding this as an opportunity to do work that they'd been wanting to do for a long time but couldn't when they're trying to keep up with everything. And there's some little signs of opportunity within all of this challenge as well. Before I get into some of the specifics of what that we're doing as a city to keep the economy going, I do want to also really take a moment to thank all of those who remain on the front lines on our behalf. The healthcare workers, the emergency responders from police, fire, and ambulance, the transit drivers, the taxi and ride-sharing drivers, the frontline organizations out there in shelters and in community-based organizations and outreach and drop-in centers that are working with the vulnerable sector and trying to get them stabilized in the community. Those who are serving you guys with groceries and pharmacy and medicines and continuing every day to be out there, not able to have the same level of physical distancing as all of those who are working from home or at home, or the cleaning staff. Each of them is putting their health at risk to keep our community safe and to make sure that those services continue to be in place. And Dr. Susan Shaw, one of the medical health officers, wrote a great article saying they're willing to do that. Those of us in the healthcare industry, she said, are willing to do that. We need to know everybody else is doing everything they can to do physical distancing. They've got our back, and by doing physical distancing and practicing these things seriously, we can show we have their back. And I thought that was a really good way of putting it. But I'm so grateful for the efforts of all those who are on the front lines. So I'm just going to talk about, I guess, 6 different points related to what we're trying to do as a city to keep our economy going. First of all, many of you have probably heard we've determined that building standards, building permits, development standards and services are a core service for the City of Saskatoon. While some cities have kind of stopped their governance process and they're not even having council meetings and other things, the City of Saskatoon has determined that we need to keep our business going. We need to keep our governance going. We had a city council meeting on not last Monday, but the Monday before, where we continued to have hearings so that we could move permits and applications through, because we recognize that by doing that, it allows those parts of the economy to carry on. And so this group has been working very hard, many of them teleworking and doing it from home, but to work with you in your applications to keep that going. Secondly, I want to recognize the very coordinated effort that's been underway by groups like the NSBA, the Chamber, SREDA, Western Economic Diversification, and others to support local businesses to get as much access as possible to the federal and provincial funding programs that have been put out there. There are some pretty significant programs, you know, for individuals, for businesses, for small businesses, and but having a coordinated effort among all of us to make sure the businesses that need that support, or the employees who've lost their job that need that support, can get it, is absolutely critical. And so I want to really thank everybody who's been part of that, and we've been playing a role with SREDA and have had a couple of valuable calls already with members of the business community and the combined business group to talk about how we can work together through this. Because it's so unprecedented, no one of us is going to be able to come up with the way to provide the most support, or to come up with the answer to solve this. It absolutely is going to take each of us. And so we had a call with business leaders where there were some very good points put forward and some areas of work that we can do together. One of them was around the small businesses and the emergency situation they have in terms of getting support even while there's waiting for federal programs. And SREDA went away from that call and came up with the Small Business Emergency Grant Program, and have already started and implemented it with $100,000, and I know are looking to get some more supports. And it's been great to see that quick adaptive turnaround. There's talk about how do we model this crisis and work with some of the larger companies in the city who have access to some of the global thinkers on this, so we can prepare and plan and forecast on how to best navigate through this, on how long it's going to take, and what we can learn from cities that are further down the road. And so that's important work that we want to carry on. Work around economic continuity, and where are there different areas that we can keep the economy going, and working together to do that is another item that was identified in the call. Working with the Indigenous community, and we've been talking a lot in our community about seeing the Indigenous economic development as a key part of the future of our economy, and that it's important to reach out and understand where the challenges are that are being faced within that community. And that's an ongoing area of work, as well as planning for the recovery. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, on a call with big city mayors, talked about how we need to get through this process, keep everybody safe, and take the steps we need, and then get ready to have the economy roar back when we can start to do that, and to plan and prepare for that as soon as we see the opportunity. And so this is something I'm committed to working with you in the business community on as well. So I want to talk a bit about the city's own plans in terms of construction. Right now, our 2020 capital program is at around $400 million that we're going to be putting out to tender into the community. We anticipate virtually all of this work will be tendered this year. There are some areas that are a bit challenging, in particular like the lead line replacement, that could involve people having to go into people's houses to do some of that work, and we may not be able to do that certainly in the spring, and it may have to get pushed off, but most of the work that we've identified as tendering as capital projects, we are planning to get out the door and to get that work going in our community. We've made lots of changes and work on our tendering process to make it as smooth and as efficient as possible, and that's underway. And obviously worksite safety is going to be absolutely critical to this process. And I've been talking to Jeff Jorgensen, who I think is on the line here, about how proud he is and interested he is at some of the innovative ideas that companies have already been putting forward about how they can still do road repairs, still do sidewalks repairs, still do underground servicing repair, and keep the site safe. And that's really important. And so this is going to be how we can collaborate, because we can't make worker safety a compromise in terms of keeping this work going. And so we're going to have to keep working together on that for sure. I also want to mention that the Cornerstone project, which is a project where our building standards department and our planning branch are working with the construction association, the home builders, on the work of improving our building permit process and efficiency of that process. And this space that we have in some ways is also creating an opportunity for them to really move ahead. And I've been hearing great things about the collaboration between those departments and the industry to reach the aspiration of being the most efficient city in terms of turnaround times for commercial building permits, as well as fees. And so I thank you to everybody who's been helping with that. And finally, in terms of our steps as a city, we're working with the federal and provincial governments to get the federal infrastructure dollars flowing into the community. There was a call with Minister McKenna last night with the big city mayors. I'm going to be talking to her again on Monday. I talked to Gord Wyant, Minister of Sask Builds, on Wednesday about this. And we have applications in the queue. We're looking forward to getting some of those dollars flowing to our city. And we see this as another piece of work that we can do to keep the economy going. So I want you to know, council and a number of members of council, I believe, on the call today, we're working together, all of us. We're meeting on a regular basis to make sure we're on top of things and hearing from one another and conveying what everybody on council is hearing from the community. And we want to be open and listen and understand and hear what it is that we can do to play our role in keeping our community as strong as possible through this, and our economy as strong as possible through this. And I've been grateful to work with such a great team, as well as in the mayor's office with Michelle, who many of you know, and my team. I'm trying to keep communicating with the community, as well as the EMO group and our City of Saskatoon staff, who have worked in such an innovative way to adapt and be able to completely overhaul our operations, to be able to ensure that we can continue to provide essential services it's been a marvel to watch everybody rise to this challenge together, and along with so many partners in the community. And we're working as closely as we can with other levels of government on this. And I'm just going to close off my comments by just briefly touching on an issue that I have been talking a lot in the public about in the last few days, and that's to do with the vulnerable sector. And the reason I've been really emphasizing this issue in the community is that I see us collectively making so much progress in terms of physical distancing and all the efforts that so many people have made to change their lives in order to physically distance and be at home and stay at home and stop this virus from spreading. I still see a gap when it comes to how what's going on with regards to the vulnerable sector, and the challenge of red tape and confusing processes between social services and the health ministry to get people into sheltered, into housing, and to support them to self-isolate. I'm hearing too many stories of people showing up at clinics, showing up at shelters, showing up at outreach centers, and there isn't a plan for where they can go or how to make sure they can get tested to find out if they have COVID. And they're bouncing around, and I'm hearing people from the front lines are coming to me saying, this is urgent, we need to fix these systems, reduce the red tape, and streamline the processes. And what I'm worried about is that could undermine all of the other efforts that are underway in the system. If this population ends up contracting COVID and then going in and overwhelming the health system, it's going to be a very, very difficult time. And so I've engaged with the provincial government on this, and I'm just taking a moment to talk about it on this call because I think I just want to recognize this is an issue of concern for all of us. And if any of you have a chance to talk to any members of government about just coming up with more streamlined processes, I'd just be very grateful for that, because I feel like as the mayor, I want to keep the community as safe as possible. And I see that we still have important work to do that's very urgent on this item. So with that, again, thank you everybody, and to everybody who's been so involved in this. And I'll pass it over for any questions at this time back to Andrew.
Yep. Just a reminder to everybody, you can toss your questions into the Q&A panel at the bottom or into the chat, and we'll answer them as they come in. Okay, so I see a question in the chat here. We appreciate the city keeping their essential services and businesses moving forward.
I can see it, Andrew. I'll just read it out. So it's a question of around when will the city start to lay off personnel? And so we have done layoffs. Actually, we've already had layoffs of all of our casual staff. Sorry, not all of it, but of a significant number of casual staff. There are seasonal workers who've been laid off. Many of the staff involved in the things like leisure facilities and other than non-essential services that we have shut down. And what we're doing is going through a very methodical process with the employees that we have to ensure to look at redeploying and making sure that we've got the workforce we need if we see employees that are affected by COVID. That can backfill. We're seeing people have to really adapt and take on roles that are not what they're used to doing in order to do some of that backfill, because we've also had people have to go into self-isolation because of travel or not be able to work because of schools closing and other things. And so the process has already started of layoffs, and it's one of the biggest areas of work that our administration is underway to, week by week, evaluate our work, evaluate how we balance, making sure we've got the right capacity in place with ensuring that we are being responsible and accountable to citizens on this. And so, yeah, layoffs have begun. I can't remember the exact number, but it's in the hundreds of the number of people who've already been laid off at this point. So we're not wanting to do that casually, but we understand that we have to find the best balance here as possible in our work. Okay, SRETA's program is a terrific initiative. Will the City of Saskatoon be able to find additional funding to provide more grants? So I'm on the SRETA board, and we had a great board discussion about this project, and the view was, let's get it out the door, let's get the applications in, use that as a way of understanding just exactly what the nature of the issues are for small businesses and what they're facing. And then that first tranche within the $100,000, and much of that is already city funding because we are major funding of SRETA. And then that'll help understand what can be done next. So at this point, we're keeping an eye on it. We're gonna have the review, and I know there's a very engaged conversation with Western Economic Diversification that has shown some interest in providing additional funding. And so if it's really clear that this is filling a need, then we'll work together to find that funding. I can't sit here today and make a commitment from the city, because certainly that's a council conversation, but we're keeping an eye on it out of the view that we have to be as adaptive and innovative as possible in addressing this. Are there other questions? Can I commit to speeding up tenders you have lined up for this year? The construction companies are searching for work and need clarity as soon as possible. Yeah, in the lead up to this meeting, I did put a request in to get some updates. One of the issues that I'd heard was around tendering. And Jeff Jorgensen, the city manager, worked with Terry Schmidt, who's the general manager of transportation, and public works, or that's not the right term, but who's kind of overseeing the construction and design side of things. And they are absolutely doing this. What we saw, for example, a delay with the Sid Buckwald Bridge. That wasn't the tendering process. That was the need to come up with the right guidelines for physical distancing to be able to do that work properly. As I understand it, we are working in all those fronts to get that $400 million of work that I talked about out and into the hands of contractors through the tendering process. But I can appreciate the urgency that the construction industry feels around this, and so this is something we're working on. All right, so from Brian, feds are unrolling lots of initiatives aimed at employers, but they're really to support employees. Businesses are incurring some major extra costs to stay open. In your conversations with the federal government, are you able to lobby for more direct support for businesses that are continuing to operate? We're forecasting $25,000 COVID-related spend on safety and new processes for April. This doesn't include any lost productivity costs. Yeah. And I think, Brian, I saw that that you guys used some of your disinfectant and hand sanitizer and shared it with the community with that spend. So, so thank you very much. Or I don't know if it was that spend, but that was another great example of business community pulling together and providing support to those on the front lines. You know, I've had 2 calls with the Deputy Prime Minister Freeland and the city mayors, and then, as I mentioned, Minister McKenna yesterday, who's infrastructure and communities, and business support is one of the things that has been an emphasis on those calls. And I think actually, you know, right before they announced some of the small business measures, we had been on the call and been pushing for this as well. I know that was still targeted towards the 75% top up from employees. And what you're talking about is more direct operational cost to businesses. And so we can keep making sure that we're reflecting that back. But you know, Bonnie Crombie, I remember from Mississauga, and Nahid Nenchi from Calgary, and John Tory from Toronto. You know, we've all been talking about these issues around the need to keep businesses afloat, and that's one of the things that we're definitely underlining. If we can keep as much of the economy going, it can help have the foundation that we can have the recovery built off of. And so I really understand how important that is. Do I have a higher degree of confidence that you'll receive additional funding to enable the city move ahead on capital projects that may have been otherwise deferred? Well, I just want to sort of be clear, our $400 million capital plan is not at risk of being delayed or deferred. We plan to go ahead with that. We have the funding in place. And so, yeah, the question is can we move some of the other dollars as stimulus and speed up some of this funding? And I will say, to be honest, in the first 2.5 weeks, so much of the work of the 3 levels of government has been around survival and around adapting our systems and around getting some of those core programs in place. And the stimulus sort of side of the conversation is starting to come up more. And with Minister McKenna last night, it came up for sure. But that's a position I'll be taking, is that this is a chance. We've got our bus rapid transit plan. It's a $200 million plan that if we could make some progress and get some contracts going, you know, that helps to get dollars going. We've got Recovery Park at which is a $60 million plan at the landfill that would is an opportunity to also get some activity, and we put these forward to the provincial and federal governments. And so I think everybody's looking for everything that every opportunity, and it's hard to exactly put a degree of confidence on this because everybody's also facing some real challenges on the financial side, but we're going to keep working on that. Any other questions?
Oh, I see there was a second part to, I believe, Keith's question there after the first one you answered, Charlie. Can you describe any cost-saving measures that the city has implemented?
Yeah, so, I mean, we've been tracking our costs, and you know, obviously we've seen some significant changes in our costs as a result of some of our layoffs and some of our decisions around staffing. You know, shutting down our leisure facilities and other things takes away some of the operational costs, but it obviously is also a revenue loss. We're looking at all of these operations because we're seeing, and this is another big conversation across the country, just at a high level estimate, we're looking at about a $3.5 to $4 million per month impact on our operating bottom line in the red. As a result of things like, you know, the leisure center revenue not being there, parking, we've shut down all parking enforcement. We are operating transit, but without any fares, and obviously at a much lower ridership anyways. But it has been identified as a critical piece to trying to make sure people can do what they need to stay healthy in the community. And so we are looking at all the measures we can to be as efficient as we can right now, and reduce our costs, and some of that has been all the work that we're doing with HR and our workforce. So there's been big systems that have just been shut down, and in addition to that, I don't have a lot of specific examples because this has been a huge undertaking to be able to reorganize our system so that we can provide those core services and essential services, because we really know how important it is that you can still get your water, you can still get your garbage picked up. We don't have garbage building up in communities, and recycling and wastewater, that everything's operating there, as well as fire and police. And as I mentioned, some of our building permitting and all of those functions still going and planning. So that's the work we're doing, and we know we've got to do it all as efficiently as possible. So let's see. So I think I got that one. How is COVID going to change the city for better or for worse? Talk about life after COVID. Brian McRae wants me to get philosophical here. And how will cities manage the cost of this big property tax increases in coming years? Yeah, so I mean, obviously this is a extremely unprecedented situation, and we're going through it with everybody else in the world. And I have a hard time predicting exactly how it's going to change us, but I do know that throughout history and throughout the history of our province, we've gone through challenging times and we find a way to get through them. And hopefully in the process, we also learn about how resilient and adaptive we can be, and how we can also in that process, sometimes, you know, people talk about a crisis can be a real opportunity for us to think differently and adapt differently. I mean, I know for us, I'm sure this is going to change our operations of our city. I know it's going to, our leadership team at the city has come together and found new ways to work together and innovate and adapt much more quickly than we would have ever seen the same urgency to do in the past. And so I think there will be systems that will be improved. I think that the more we can all work together and realize we're all on the same team between the city and the business community and solving these things, that's something we can carry through into the into the future. And I'm seeing that with our building standards branch and our industry partners, and also in the calls that we've had with business associations. Those are relationship-based ways that the stronger we are working together, the more we can adapt and change and respond. I mean, I think I'm not going to wax too philosophical on exactly how this could change us, but I hope it also helps us understand that we're only as strong as our weakest link, and we've got to have the right systems in place to make sure people are looked after in our community. So that when we're faced with struggles like this, we don't end up with the challenges of the most vulnerable population, for example, overwhelming the system as a whole. And we can use the adaptation and the generosity and the spirit of community of the business community even to help us continue to adapt and develop the best systems to do that. Okay, let me see. And in terms of managing the cost, we're in, just so you also know, in terms of cities managing the cost of this, Saskatoon is among 8 cities in Canada that are part of a working group on this financial challenge that we're facing. And Carrie Tarasoff, our CFO, is engaged with 8 other cities as part of working with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities on this. And when it comes to the question of big property tax increases in coming years, we've made an ask to the federal government to consider, they doubled the gas tax last year. One thing they could do would be to do the gas tax allocation to cities. And if they did that this year, because this is at least some of these costs are operating costs for this year. We don't know how it's going to change next year, but we can see them as one time. That could make a big difference in not having this result in having to pass on some of these impacts to taxpayers. As I said, we're looking at $3.5 to $4 million a month. It's significant. It'll either affect our future property taxes or our reserves or our borrowing and our credit limit. And I think we're just going to have to all talk to each other about what are the options that we have, and how do we have those impacts be mitigated on people and businesses. But whatever choice we make, and I think the next question is about tax holidays and not deferrals, and that's the same point. Like if we started to say, okay, we're gonna give a tax holiday for businesses that are affected, it opens that financial gap wider that we have each month, and the hole that we're in, and then we would have to determine what's the appetite in the community for future property tax increases or effects on our credit rating or effects on our reserves and borrowing. This is what we have to figure out. And so I know that's a question that's come up. We're going to be talking to other cities, talking to the community, and we're going to be continuing to work on that. Question about the city redirecting its regular grant funding towards the vulnerable sector. We have a number of our staff who are working, who work with communities on a regular basis in some of the community efforts that are actually playing a really critical role right now in this incredible coordinated response where a number of different CBOs like Aid Saskatoon and organizations like the Tribal Council and others have all banded together to provide services together because they've had to close a lot of their regular operations down. And they've created an incident command system that has a location at the White Buffalo Youth Lodge, as well as one at the Salvation Army on the west side. And what we're doing is we're allocating some of our staff to help provide services and use the relationships and the systems that they have. The regular grant funding that we have, I mean, it's all been tied, much of it is tied up in a lot of these organizations that are already providing these services. So we're not in a position to redirect funding towards this. But we are putting the resources into this to support. For example, SHIP, the Saskatoon Housing Initiatives Program, that's a group that works with multiple housing providers, and we provide funding to SHIP to help them do their coordinating work with the homeless, and then they take federal money to access and allocate that to some of the programs that are out there to provide supports. And the federal government has increased funding to SHIP to this area, and so we're supporting, the feds are supporting. What we can't do is to backfill what is needed from the health system and from social services, because those are, in a lot of cases, it's just as much about systems as funding, and that's where we really need more streamline and less red tape to ensure people can get housed. Likely an unfair question as it is historical, but are you aware of other years where the City of Saskatoon has experienced significant deficit midstream? Yeah, I mean, I'm aware of 2017 when we had a $12 million cut to our budget that was embedded in the provincial budget. So that's actually almost the equivalent of $3 million of, 3 months of this same impact that we're looking at with the COVID crisis. And I think you all remember we ended up doing negotiating with our unions that we would have no wage increases that year, cutting a number of different programs, finding efficiencies, dealing with some fees and services, but it wasn't associated with some of these same really dramatic changes to our overall operations and some of those types of things. So you know, we're going into this as a city with a AAA credit rating, and with the Standard & Poor's has looked at our books, they've looked at our planning, they've looked at our management, and they've said the City of Saskatoon, and there's only, I think, 4 cities in the country that have a AAA credit rating. And so I guess I can reassure you that from that point of view, it could be a lot worse for us to be facing this right now, because our books are in good shape. While we still have among the lowest business property taxes in the country as well, CD Howe, KPMG, they've all identified this over the years. And so this is something that we have to adapt to and look at on an ongoing basis, how we're going to manage this. But that is some of the foundation that we have to work with. And so I guess that's the most direct experience I have of the city responding to a significant deficit midstream. I'm going to take a drink. So I'm not seeing other questions come up, but I saw a couple of ideas there around advocating to the federal government for support on some of the regular business operating costs, in addition to staffing costs, and the question about a tax, not just tax deferral, but tax forgiveness. I guess I'm looking to hear from you other thoughts you have for me and for council and the council members that are in on the call today about what we should be paying attention to, where you think some of the biggest concerns are in the community that we want to turn our attention to. based on the impacts that you're seeing on your businesses or your colleagues' businesses or your staff.
I'll just chime in here too to remind everybody, if you want to give a verbal answer to the mayor's question, just use your raise hand button and I'll come around and turn your mic on so that you can ask that verbally.
I don't mind actually talking to people and not just reading the questions, but I guess this is your chance to give me feedback.
So I've just turned Brian's mic on here so he can ask a question or give an answer, I should say. We're in that portion.
Hey Charlie, thanks for taking the time today. I think governments have a really big challenge in terms of how they're going to manage through this and sort of life after COVID. I think that I appreciate that governments have to continue bringing revenue in so they can support these things. But I didn't ask the holiday question, but I think the general concern that I have as a business owner and it's not just our businesses, it's seeing peers in the community and deferrals. It's just like stealing from Peter to pay Paul, and eventually Peter's got to get paid, and we're kicking the can down the road. And I get really concerned that if there's a cash crunch now for businesses, I mean, what's it going to be like in 6 months when anyone that's taken deferrals on GST, PST, payroll remittances, property taxes, going to be left with a really, really big bill and a lot of cash to come up with when, I just don't know what life after COVID looks like. So I guess that's my concern with some of the mechanisms that we're seeing. I don't think we're seeing enough from particularly the province or the feds to actually really provide any sustainable relief to the business community. And so that'd be my message, would be to sort of in your conversations, just think about, deferrals help today, but they will not help in 6 months from now, when hopefully we're sort of back to business as usual. And the bills are going to, your AP is going to be high, and you're going to have to find the cash somewhere, and banks are going to be really funny. So just a big caution with some of the strategies around that.
Yeah, understood. I mean, we turned around that deferral move in terms of not disconnecting people from utilities and allowing for that deferral, partly because we are also just about to, our property tax bills were just about to be released for the year as well. And we knew that at minimum we needed to not have that become something that is a further driver for people to put the nail in the coffin for business or whatever it might be. But also with very much the awareness that the danger is if people just take advantage of that and they defer, and then, like you say, they're still going to be hit with that bill. But at the same time, we felt that it was an important step that we could take. And what I'm hearing from you, Brian, is you're not looking for the city to try and backfill some of those business costs, but that there's a real urgency for the provincial and federal governments to make a move there. And I mean, I've had a few people reach out to me about tax forgiveness, and I'm probably other councillors have. I think that's a big conversation that carries some big downstream risks as well. I also know, relatively speaking, I mean, and maybe that people have thoughts on this, the property tax bill side of it is not going to be the make or break for a lot of businesses. But I want to stay engaged and learn, because this is so unprecedented. I guess the tenor of this for me is we'll take ideas, we'll look at them, we'll evaluate them, and we'll also talk to you about the risks and benefits of doing something differently. But I'll certainly take what you're saying to the provincial and federal governments as well.
Can you hear me, Charlie?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, it's Keith here. I can unmute myself, I learned. I was looking for the raise a hand option, but I didn't see that.
We're all getting so technologically savvy now.
So firstly, thank you very much for making the time for us today. We really appreciate it. And furthermore, as you know, in comments that I made to you. We appreciate your leadership that you're exhibiting on this particular file, and really thank you for that leadership. One thing that I think that I've stressed to you in the past as well, but I just want to reiterate, it seems as though all levels of government, and this is no criticism whatsoever, but just to acknowledge the obvious, rightfully so, are putting their efforts and all of their attention towards the health sector and the safe and healthy of people, and of course flattening the curve, which of course is critical for all. So again, no criticism there. My fear is that, and I think it's kind of a theme that's developing from maybe some of the comments Brian's raised and so on, but I'm not certain that, again, it's all levels of government are treating the economic side of the equation, like the boomerang that's coming economically, with the right amount of critical awareness at this point, as they should be. And so I would encourage you, and I know that you are, but just once again to reaffirm in your conversations with the powers that be to really start that dialogue at a more critical pace. And then I guess to Brian's question as well, in terms of what the city can do, I would encourage you and your colleagues around council, and certainly Carrie Tarasoff and others, Jeff Jorgensen as well, of course, but to really start thinking about this holiday notion in terms of utility rates and even a free or a forgiven portion that I know will be hard to accommodate. And that was sort of what I was asking when I asked about that wartime and your reference about the 12 million drop from the province in 2017 was a very good answer as well. I'd forgotten about that already. But I think it's critical that you really start to think outside the box and see what can be done, because I don't think that people are, like the general population and perhaps even some of our elected officials are really seeing the crisis that is on the horizon, and that is the economic crisis, because it's coming. And when you don't have businesses open or around to employ people, it's going to be hitting all of these tax collectors even harder than what I think they're envisioning. Thank you.
Yeah, and I've been thinking a lot about that, because we know the health threat of COVID-19, but there's a health threat to a whole bunch of people not having livelihoods too, right? And so we have to figure out how to not have the response to COVID-19, which is clearly necessary. It's clearly not working, and if people don't take it seriously, they can be just delaying the impacts economically and from a health standpoint further, or making them even worse. But there are also health and social and financial impacts to people losing their livelihoods and businesses shutting down. And so we have to find a way together to work our way through that. And I guess my comment in regards to things like tax holidays, the reason we're in this together, I can commit to transparency and to laying out, if we start talking about things like that, what if the city is going to, or city council is going to do something dramatic that would even further erode our operating situation, it could lead to future tax increases or debt position, or it could make it much more difficult to do future projects that we're looking at that I know that are desired in the business community. Like, I don't have the analysis of all of those things, but I think I just want you to know, whatever we do, there is a downstream effect of that. And I don't take that lightly either, because if that downstream effect comes and taxes go up, or our credit rating changes, and then we get criticized by the business community, or anybody in the community. I'm not trying to make the business community one big group, but that's the balancing act that we're going to be facing. So I'd suggest my view, and I'm just speaking as mayor, is we can analyze and look at these things, and I think we need to do that together, and then determine what risks we're prepared to stomach as a community to deal with this, because some of them could have some significant hits. But we're also learning and very engaged, right? Like I said, Carrie Tarasoff with other cities, Michelle Beveridge, my chief of staff, is very engaged with other mayors' offices, and I'm talking to mayors, and we're going to also find the best way through that, working with other communities that are facing the same thing. But the message that we need to recognize the risk to the overall health of our society, of the economic impact of this, needs to be taken as seriously as the risks of COVID. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, and I take that very seriously, Keith.
Thank you. I'll maybe just follow up with another question, if I may. Some more personal nature, Charlie, and it's not just around you and your executive leadership team, but also around Saskatoon's EMO and fire department and police service and so on. How are you and your leadership team coping and managing in this time? Because I know it's very long days and it's challenging and stressful and all these things. So how are you and your leadership team coping and managing, and then maybe expand into the emergency response teams, how they are in turn going to be able to cope, and how long they can manage this crisis scenario, like if it goes on for weeks or months?
Well, I have a job and my family is home safe, and I have a role to play in all of this. And in some ways, I feel like I'm coming out of it better than a lot of people who are laid off or shutting businesses and all. I shouldn't say better, but I mean, sometimes I feel lucky to be where I am in all of this. But it's been a very dramatic 3.5 weeks. I mean, we all remember I'm sure the Wednesday when on the morning the Junos were going to go ahead, and things seemed far away, the risks of this. And this, I think that was March the 11th. And by the evening, it just felt like the whole world had changed. And we were suddenly, by that Sunday, we had decided to close all of our leisure centers and completely start to change our operations. And so it's been a whirlwind. You guys, everybody on this call can be so proud of the staff, the team, the EMO, Pamela Golden McLeod's leadership, and Jeff and all of the staff who have just been incredible. And you know, and also council. Like, we talk almost every day, and everybody's working together, listening to each other, supporting each other. Felt so grateful for the work with council and Michelle Beveridge, who's been putting in long hours as well. And so it's been remarkable, and being on a team that's working together, that's willing to put their egos and their positions and their those roles aside and just say, what I'm here, what can I do to help, has been an amazing leadership experience. And it's shown me the value of relationships. And then also working, Keith, we've had a few conversations around this and supporting one another through it. And so many people in the community that I've gotten to know that give me confidence that we can get through this together. I am concerned about our frontline service folks. I've been in touch with Troy Cooper on a regular basis. Was talking to Troy Davies yesterday from MD Ambulance, Chief Hockle and Fire. Those services are also having to completely overhaul their progress. If you think about, you know, March, February, January, March are times when a lot of people go traveling, right? So once the guidelines around travel came in and all the self-isolation, a whole bunch of the workforce, the fire and police, went down in addition to the city, the Medivy. And then they're out there in a situation where we now know there's community transmission of COVID. They're going to the toughest situations in the community and putting their health on the line to do it. This is why I'm advocating for a more coordinated approach for the vulnerable sector, because I'm worried about the health of those frontline workers who are not having the systems in place to take people safely to somewhere that they can stay and be inside, because they're bouncing around through systems that are not working. But you know, Chief Cooper has reassured me over and over again, we're up to this challenge, we're ready for it. Our members are ready to serve. The same thing from Chief Hockle, same thing from MD, same thing as we're hearing from the health sector. So at this point, I'm not concerned that we're not going to be able to keep this city running. based on everything I've seen and based on the incredible efforts of people to step up. And that's the power of being in this community. And I've said it before, and I believe it, that we're in one of the best places in the world to go through a challenge like this, because we can pull everybody together and work together. And we have that history, and it's hard, and it's not going to get easier in the next little while. We know it's going to get harder before it's going to get better. But when the world and communities have gone through these kind of tragedies and challenges in the past, they do pull together, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel on the other side. And there's a whole bunch of lessons that can be learned and innovations that can happen that can make us even stronger. And there's no reason why that can't be the case here. It's just that we don't quite know when that other side is, and how long it's going to take to get there.
For sure. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks again for that good response. And I've got the utmost of confidence in the services, emergency response teams, and so on, and leadership that you and your leadership team are providing. So just thanks once again, and thanks again for making time for us today.
Excellent. Well, is there any other comments or questions? I don't know if I have a closing statement that's going to be different than the one I just made, because I feel like that's kind of at the heart of the moment that we're in. But we have a couple minutes left if anybody has any more feedback for me and the members of council that are on the call here today. I don't think so. So I guess I'll just say thank you all. Our door is open. We want to work together. We want to hear your thoughts. We'll keep exploring ideas, and we'll keep looking at some of the efforts around forecasting and recovery. This is all going to be a key part of our work in the days and weeks to come. And we're open to hearing whatever ideas you have to help us get through this together. Stay safe. Have a good weekend. Enjoy time with your family and your friends, and finding those opportunities through this challenge to see life in a different way. Take care.